Hello, everyone. Welcome to our April webinar, discuss the state of the solar industry with the industry experts that we've invited on. And we appreciate each person jumping on and sharing their words of wisdom and insight into what's going on in the solar industry, both residential and commercial. Just so you know, I have activated or allowed your camera and your mic. So if your mic is not muted, if you could just mute that if you're not speaking, I'd sure appreciate that. We just want to extend our gratitude to each one of you guys as customers and partners and vendors, and solidifying, a really good group of people that we know in the solar industry who are based on the values of quality and really rising everyone in this solar industry. And I'd like to introduce Scott Whistling, who is the owner of Whistling Consulting, who's been instrumental. And I like to say he's a people collector. Scott is very good at finding people that are like-hearted, that really care about the industry, that care about quality, that care about communication. And I was a customer of Scott's, and I've been here for 2.5 years, and I just want to introduce him and tell him thank you and let him take it away.
Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. And I'd like to think that the industry is really all about connections and collaboration and partnerships. All of you who may be partners with us or customers of ours, I always talk about this at the very get-go, is that we're not about trying to capitalize on what we can make. We're more about how can we develop a relationship and be a partner to help all of our customers be better at what they do, because when you guys are better at what we do, we're better at what we do, right? Your success is our success. So thank you, Ben. And Ben was a customer of ours, and we worked with him for several years. And I think a lot of what the values and principles that we have at Whistling Consulting are something that prompted Ben to want to come and work with us. So anyway, appreciate that. Let me introduce our professionals on the call who work with us, that we get to work together. Is Heath Harpster is our Director of Structural Engineering. We have Greg Elvestad, who is our Director of Electrical Engineering, and we have Catherine Kelso, who is our Director of Commercial Engineering. Both Catherine and Greg are licensed. Actually, everybody on this call is licensed PEs. Catherine's recently got her license at the end of last year, and licensed in about 25 states now. Greg and I are licensed in all 50 states, plus most of the provinces in Canada, as well as Heath. And Heath is licensed, I think, in 48 states. I think it's just Alaska and California, the only two states that Heath isn't licensed in. So we certainly have gotten around in the time that we've been doing this. So I wouldn't say that we're experts in the industry, but I'd like to think we collectively, with everybody on this call, that there isn't much that we can't accomplish or help with. So anyway, but thanks so much for all of you guys joining. It is humbling to hosting a webinar. If you asked me this 5-7 years ago, I wouldn't think that I'd even want to do something like this, or even have the capability to do something like this. But with the team that we built out now, and the reputation in the industry that we have, and the professionals that we have working for us, it is a humbling experience to be here now today. So anyway, thanks for all of you. I like these open formats. We've kind of moved toward doing these, which is where we'll reach out to some of you guys, because I really want this to be a discussion where all of you participate, right? And that we work together to kind of collectively provide our expertise and experience in the industry to help us all, learn and grow in the industry. So we've asked several people if they would be willing to kind of participate, and probably just more of like a roundtable discussion. So I'll kick it off by talking about some of the topics that I've written down, and I'll give you some of those topics where we're going to talk about site surveys and site survey concerns. We're going to talk about electrical concerns, common problems that we've seen from a design perspective and an engineering perspective. We'll talk about storage becoming more popular, and maybe even almost more than solar itself, where people are looking to just do backups and storage, right? We'll want to talk a little bit about a state of the union, pulse on solar. It's always interesting to get everybody's feedback on where we see the industry going and what the pitfalls have been, changes in the market, supply chains issues. All of those things are good to talk about. shift from residential to commercial. And those are really the only topics I have down. Then we're open for any other conversation or discussion that we need to talk about. So let's chat a little bit about site surveys. And I know we have, I've chatted with Carson, who is from Site Survey AI. And are you on the call, Carson? I'm assuming you're here. Yes, Carson Cloud.
I'm here somewhere.
Okay. So Carson Cloud has a company called Site Survey AI, and he and I have been chatting quite a bit as of lately, because I really feel like Carson is one of the few companies that do site surveys who actually does it right, and really does what we actually been working with him on some other projects that we're working on, and the product that he delivers to us, it makes it much faster for us to do our certifications and our review, because he kind of gets it. And actually, we even have an open forum where we reach out to him or he reaches out to us if there's questions about something that is out in the field, rather than having to go through our customers to get to their site surveyor. It just works out pretty good. And, you're happy to reach out to him. Carson, if you want to drop your contact information in the chat, you're welcome to do that if anybody's interested in talking to him.
Yeah.
But to start out, I wanted to see if I could ask Heath if he could identify some of the things that we've seen on site surveys that are things that are valuable for us, and maybe things that aren't so valuable for us, like maybe pitfalls that I've seen. And then Carson, I wouldn't mind if maybe we can talk a little bit about what your process is and how you're doing your site surveys and the importance of what you do. So Heath, if you have some insight here that you can share with us.
Sure.
And just before you do that, Heath, if anybody is interested in interjecting some thoughts, please don't be afraid to do that. It'd be good if you could raise your hand. But if we're not noticing that, or you go into the chat and say, hey, I have a question, or you can even ask a question in the chat. Ben is monitoring that on the Q&A as well, so that we can field questions that you might be dropping in here. But also, I'm happy to have you, speak and speak up and have questions that you might have. So go ahead, Heath. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and this is from a structural standpoint. On the residential side, things that were being seen lately, and it's always kind of a pet peeve because you can't really do much with it, but are just general photos in an attic without any measurements. I don't know why some site surveyors don't take measurements. But sometimes you get photos
I know why, Heath. I know why they don't take measurements, but it would be better if they do. And I'm sure Carson knows why they don't take measurements, but
well, I don't know why, but I've definitely gotten tons of photos where it's from below the attic looking up into the attic space and things like that. Just measurements go a long way, especially in older homes where you don't know if something's rough sawn. You can tell me it's 2x6, but if the home's 100 years old and we can't get 2x6s to work, but rough sawns will work, that's good information. Survey the garage while they're out there, because sometimes you don't know where it's going to be placed. When they go out there, sometimes you end up putting stuff on the garage and they don't go into there, which is usually very easy to access, open framing and everything. We did have a webinar previously on site surveys too that have a lot of good information. And it's kind of a leeway into another topic here as well. When we have finished ceilings, we do have this tab on just how to figure out what the framing is on finished ceilings. If there's skylights, you can measure the skylight openings to get an idea of the depth of the framing. You can remove a light fixture in the ceiling and stick like a coat hanger or something up there to measure the depths. And then there's also a trick for flat roofs in particular, where you can measure from a window on the inside to the ceiling. And then if you measure from the exterior to the top of the roof, you can get a good idea of what the framing is too on flat roofs. What else have we been seeing?
So the reason why, Heath, that we really do need survey information, including depth of rafters and spacing, is because we do actually do calculations where we verify that roof is going to support the additional loading. Go figure. That's kind of what we do, right? So it's important for those measurements, just so that we can calculate exactly what the deflection is going to be, if it's within code or outside of code. and sometimes we're making an engineering judgment. I'm not saying that there aren't situations where we can assume something, but we try not to assume a lot of rafter dimensions simply because we could always have a problem when you go out there. But there is a certain percentage that we do. Even with finished roofs, we wouldn't say you can't install on a finished roof because we don't know exactly what the roof system is. We can make some assumptions, but
And more jurisdictions are requiring actual calculations on the framing too, which is hard to do with when you're assuming the framing as
Right.
well.
looks like
Emmett, if you
Emmett
have a
had
question, you can unmute yourself and ask
Yeah,
away.
Emmett, did you have a question?
Oh, I actually had a comment because a lot of the surveys that I participated in were in Cook County in Chicago,
Mhm.
which has its own NEC book that you have to deal with. You have to deal with everything in conduit, and then you have this mix of old houses from 1802, it seems like.
Yeah.
And then someone will literally next door who wants solar will tear down that house, build an ultra modern thing, and you're going through this neighborhood and you're trying to do surveys. And if you're a crew or you're from outside of Chicago, you might be hit with a surprise. You're like, wait, what? And the houses are this close together.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration depending on the jurisdiction. That's all I want to say.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Carson,
Yeah, and on
what
the
do you-
electrical side, if Greg, you wanted to comment on that as well.
Well, there's the other side of things as well as pictures that are blurry or they're incomplete. Or they'll give you the close-up of the meter socket, for example, but you can't tell where that lives on the house. And you don't know if you've got working space issues or not. I mean, there's a reason why 11026 exists. If you can't park a fridge there and not have a tip over, anything you want to put on the wall better not go there. So you've got to make sure that there's safety is paramount to everything we do. We're licensed
Right.
professionals, and those of you who provide the services and do the deployment of the equipment and the materials that we use in this industry, everybody wants it done safely. Because A, we don't want to go back because go back is kill profit, and B, if it's not safe, that ruins somebody's life and somebody's reputation as a professional. So we got to make sure that we do this right. And that's why
Yeah.
surveys are so important. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
guys.
well, you want to do it right the first time too, so you don't have to go back out. And that's
Right.
another thing on what I've been seeing lately too is, you get roofs that look like the ridge looks like a banana, and then you don't get good information on it. If you want to end up putting solar on that roof, then we need to figure out why it looks that way and what we need to do. So if you're out there, I mean, you don't have to be an engineer to look at a roof and say that doesn't look good. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to provide that adequate information for us to analyze and see what needs to be done.
Well, thank you, Heath. So, Carson, what are your thoughts? I know you've been smiling and taking notes while we're talking about this, but
Yeah.
tell us
No,
what
this is
your
awesome.
process is and your thoughts on some of the woes that we see is from an engineering perspective when it comes to site survey.
For sure. Emmett, also, I'm in Chicago, by the way. So all the Cook County problems and whatnot, when we started the company, it was in Chicago. So we've definitely seen some things for sure. And especially like inside that attic, when you see like fire burns and just marking, it's crazy what you see in there. So it's funny that you bring that up. Big thing on the structural end that we're seeing is any tile roofs, like making sure you're grabbing that tile weight and testing that underlayment. Even in markets like Las Vegas or Arizona, some of your hotter climates, even on new roofs, we've seen paper not pass a bend and scratch test because they leave that tile up and they don't do the install quick enough, and then it's just brittle. It just cracks. We've got Nick Watson in here too. Nick's our VP of Ops. He just gave that information there too, if you guys saw that. So that's one thing we've seen. Another is obviously equipment clearance from gas and your windows, making sure that you grab all those measurements. because that's a big pain in the butt. If you get all the way to installing that equipment and it doesn't pass your inspection, like not very cheap to fix, right? So some of the common things we've seen. Nick, I don't know if you want to add on to that too.
Yeah, I think some of the most important things for installers, and by the way, like most of my life has been on the EPC side in this industry. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years, worked at some of the largest companies running both commercial and residential operations. And some of the biggest challenges that we run into is definitely the roofing material, like Carson pointed out, the tile roofs. We want to get a sample of the underlayment from the tiles across all sections of the roof plane that we're going to be installing on. So we tried to pull a tile at the bottom left corner, a tile in the middle of the roof, and a tile at the top right corner, so that we get a good representation of the felt underneath the tile across the entire roof plane. We also try to lift up the composition shingles and take a measurement of how many layers of comp shingles are on the roof, so that we can identify how many times the roof's been re-roofed and how much weight is on there with the different tiles or the comp shingles. Um, I think going into the attic, Heath, that's one of the bigger challenges. If there's attic access, it's pretty easy, and we can climb up there and get the measurements that we need. I think a lot of times the reason why people don't go in there, to answer your question as to why they're not doing it, is because it's dirty, it's hot, and it's just not that fun. It's just not that fun part
Yeah.
of the job.
Nick,
So
I had one the other day where they had the access, the ladder pulled down at the bottom of the ladder, taking a picture up at the access, and no photos from
Yeah.
inside the attic.
yeah, that was awesome. That way you guys know where the access is, right? When
Yeah,
you go
it's
back out there
helpful.
to get the information you need. Yeah, and that's the part that kind of sucks, but we've been dealing with it. We work with our guys heavily. We do a weekly training internally to make sure that we're going over the requirements. One of the challenging things for us is that we work with a lot of different customers, and each one has its own template and information that they want us to gather. So sometimes it's not necessarily the surveyor that's not gathering the information. It might be the customer that doesn't know what they don't know. They might not know that they need attic information. And honestly, I've seen that a lot in this industry. A lot of people that are just kind of glossing over the attic. Maybe they're making it up down the road. Maybe they're not having to deal with it at all. I don't really know. But what we do is every customer that we partner with, we try to identify what their requirements are. We ask them for a copy of their checklist, and then we will mold our process specifically to what their checklist is and what their requirements are, so that we're making sure that we're delivering it to them. Overall, if we see something that they're missing, we'll make some recommendations and tell them this is typically what we do. But for the most part, it's a driven questionnaire from the customer that we're executing in the field on their behalf. Emmett, you
Great.
got a question?
Yeah, Emmett, go ahead if you have your question. Then I want to
Yeah.
move on to another topic. So let's wrap up
Yeah, this is
after
a
this. And then
this is
we'll
a
move
real
on.
quick this is a really quick one. As solar
Sure.
progresses into these older cities, there's a thing that you may run into, which I've run into, is knob and tube in attics, where there's a blended system, and some of the newer young electricians, they've never seen this. They're like, what is this stuff with conductors that are wrapped in cloth? And they're just like,
Yeah.
but if you don't get into that attic and check out the survey, you won't know that that's there. And they're wondering, why did they have these planks that are just all across the joist? It's just little things, and you guys are just bringing up memories.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
I do want to comment on one thing that I think really kind of separates us from everybody else in the industry, that's trying to do site surveys. We are a national company. We have representation across the entire continental US. We do work internationally as well. But our product, we fly a drone and we get 3D imaging that allows us to go back and take measurements on the exterior. Even if there's something that's missed at the time while we're there, we can go back into our 3D model and take those measurements, and we're accurate to down less than half an inch. So we have the exterior walls, we have the roof, We have all of the exterior measurements along with a 3D model, along with the roof integrity verification up front, before anybody starts doing a design or starts working on that project. So our info is pretty detailed, and it allows us to gather information that most surveys aren't capable of gathering after the fact.
Yeah, and that's super valuable. One of the things that I think you guys are doing really well. And how long does it typically take you when you get a site survey request, how long does it usually take you to get out there and get the site survey? That's important as well, the timing.
Yeah, I mean, that's dependent on the customer. We have an interactive system that they can go in and they can schedule an appointment. We usually have appointments available within 24 hours. Most of the time, we'll almost always have an appointment available within 48 to 72 hours. If a survey gets pushed out beyond that, it's because the customer's wanting it to be pushed out beyond that time frame. But we're usually extremely responsive within a 24-hour turnaround time.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate that. And
Thank you, Scott.
I can't stress how important from what we do is those site surveys are. So, anybody on this call who wants to chat with us or either Nick or Carson, happy to help you through that. We'll even help provide some training as well. And I'm sure that Nick and Carson would, if you have people in-house, happy to help there. Yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to mention, which probably should have mentioned first, was, some of you may have been involved with the event. It was an appreciation day that Chint Power Solutions put on last week. And I think we actually have Luke Harden, who's on the call from Chint Power. And I just wanted to personally thank everybody at Chint, right? Luke and all your team did a great job. For those of you who don't know what that is, Chint Power puts on an appreciation day every year where they invite their vendors and their clients and to their facilities out in Dallas, and they help and they show appreciation for them. And it's pretty rare in the industry that I've seen something like this. But they actually will put people up in hotels. They had meals, 3 meals every day. They showcased all of their new products, went over numbers. They talked about their management team and how they train and their core values. It was really a wonderful event to be part of. And they actually allowed their vendors, us being one of them, to have tables where we actually did like a vendor day where we showcased our company, and some of their vendors came and walked around it. We really have gotten a lot of leads from that event, and we are super excited about it, excited about what we're going to do next year. They even took everybody out to go see a ball game, which was super fun to see the Rangers play at the new Dallas Stadium. So I don't know, Luke, do you want to take a minute just to kind of say what your thoughts were on the success of the event that you guys put together, and maybe tell us a little bit about your product?
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Like you said, it's really an event to give back to our customers. Great for networking with other companies, displaying some of the new innovations that we have for the market. But it was a great event, and we really appreciate you guys coming out. Chint Power Systems, we do 3-phase string inverters. We're in the utility field, as well as C&I. And if anyone is interested in possibly joining next year, feel free to give me a message and we'll shoot you an invite.
Yeah, you're happy to drop your email in if you want to into the chat. If anybody wants to reach out to Luke, that would be for next year would be great. But thank you, Luke. Cool. Well, let's move on. Next topic. I think Emmett's just chomping at the bit to talk about electrical concerns. And because he's already done that with some of the site survey issues, but I kind of wanted Greg to kind of get us started on that. And then maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion. Let's try and minimize that to maybe 5 minutes so we can go through some other topics as well. So Greg, do you want to maybe talk about
Sure.
some of the things that we're seeing from a commercial and residential perspective when it comes to electrical?
Yeah, Matt. I'll touch on commercial right out of the gate because a lot of companies are involved in that, and we've got folks like Chint and Everett Brewer from stores on here who work almost exclusively in the commercial field, I'm seeing a lot of clients come to us making assumptions that they can just supply tap in a switchboard. And sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. So we got to be really, really careful with that. Because number one, you've got to have the right protective equipment to be able to access the panel board to even see inside there where you might be able to connect. And so folks like Nick and Carson's teams, they got to be really careful about what they look for and look at when they're surveying these big load centers. Arc flash studies and fault current calculations are going to be the norm going forward. NFPA 70E is part of our world. We can't get away from it. So you've got to make sure that you know what you're doing and how you're doing it, and making sure you train your personnel correctly. The other thing is, I'm still seeing residential installers out there not understanding that supply tap interconnections have to have a bonded first disconnect. And so we talk through that with them. So we're educating folks all the time on this. So Emmett, your thoughts on a few things?
Yeah, the biggest thing is when you get some installers, we have this, I want to call it apprentice mindset, but it's not an apprentice mindset. It's a follow mindset who becomes an electrician, but they don't necessarily understand the math behind it. They don't understand, they know the mechanics. They're really good with the mechanics, but they're not good with the science of it. And it really has to, there needs to be a mechanism in place, an incentive for these people to get the education. And this leads me into what we're experiencing after last July 4th, where that 30% tax bracket was taken away. Now people are scrambling. Now you have residential people saying, hey, we're going to go into commercial. Yeah, okay, right. Or we're going to go into O&M. That's a different beast. And my thing, and I have a talk coming up about it, is to tell them, this thing is evolving. There are other ways for you to sustain your business because there's new products that are coming online. And instead of slapping panels, you should put people on an energy journey in how to make their home more efficient first, see what you need to offset and what they really need, because so many times it's been a money grab in some situations with some companies that has caused us some detrimental harm within the industry itself. That's all I'm going to say about that. As Forrest Gump would say, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Nice. Well, thank you, Emmett. I appreciate that. I know that it's interesting that you brought up people who were doing residential. They said, oh, let's just do commercial. And I was thinking that it's not as simple as just saying, you know what, we were doing residential, let's just jump over and start installing commercial. I mean, there's a lot more involved with that, especially with the electrical requirements, and where people can, you're not talking smaller load centers at this point. You're talking large systems. So, what are your thoughts there? I mean, I'm sure you have some more opinion related to people moving into commercial. I mean, I know it's hot now. There's a lot of people moving into commercial. So,
I had a conversation in Dallas last week outside with an electrician. And it made me think about the people who want to do this. And we were having this discussion about 480 and 600 volt inverters that are not utility scale, but commercial scale, some utility scale. And he said something very interesting. I was like, out of these inverters, and I'm not going to name the manufacturers, I said, what's your biggest problem? He says, I get noise on the AC line on the distributed energy inverters that are coming from drives that are coming from factories. So if you have these are just things that someone coming from residential don't even have a clue about. I mean, just the voltage level jump and the safety is a whole concern. And the one thing is, there's no viable pathway for someone to transition with that unless I worked for residential, I had some experience, I'm working for a commercial company, and I'm learning as I go from there. But other than that, there's no real pathway for companies to transition and to level up without having an infrastructure. I know NABCEP is there, but that's we're talking business model switch versus having someone learn knowledge. So there's a lot of things that are in place that people aren't thinking about because they're only thinking about the dollar and how to survive versus how do I do the best job or how do I be the best representation for this part of the industry.
Yeah. Well, and I agree 100%. And being at the show last week, we've been at RE Plus, and the level of people who were there with the knowledge base from a commercial perspective, they are very sophisticated in what they do, right? So it's hard to just transition from residential to commercial. Most companies have someone who, has experience in commercial, and maybe they're doing both. But that's one thing I did notice, and I walked away saying these are very sophisticated developers who are doing commercial. And frankly, I was talking with my team about this, having a lot of people in residential all use design companies that outsource their engineering, and the customers never even talk to the engineer. But electrical, these commercial contractors, they're sophisticated enough to know that doesn't really work. And so doing commercial projects, you really do need to have a company, well, not that I'm tooting our own horn here, but who does both, that does design and does engineering, because you can't do the design without the engineering, and you don't have the resources there to be able to answer those questions. But anyway, Everett from Store Power, you have a question, or a comment. So yeah, if you want to unmute yourself, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So, one thing that you touched on just recently is you use the word development, right? So 80% of a commercial project is all in development, understanding, going from utility analytics to identifying avoided costs. If you don't know what that means, find out, because that's a different threshold when it comes to all of your utility analytics, identifying feasibility of a project and what its CapEx and OpEx looks like. And obviously modeling in now, whether you're doing a straight Chinese set of goods or you're going FIOC, PFE rules on as far as supply and equipment, especially past the July 4th deadline that we all are coming up upon, especially on the solar side of the equation. But all of that is part of your development ecosystem. And then after you identified full viability of all aspects that are interconnection methods, your constructability, what your procurement stacks looks like, what your actual deployment of construction looks like, whether that's in-house or third party, that's where you're actually following a plan. And that's the other 10 and 10, interconnection and installation and commissioning and making sure you do your closeout docs accurately and correctly. If many may know, I also own WattHub Renewables. We've been doing CNI and utility scale microgrid for 19 years now. And so we see about 250 or so plus or minus projects a month, and we have a lot of guys transitioning from resi into commercial, and unfortunately are using residential software. They're not accounting for proper softwares like ETV or so on and so forth to account for proper utility modeling. They're not accounting for demand chargers. They're not accounting for interconnection methods, line side tap, capacity studies, whatever that may be. And most importantly is financeability, right? The financing mechanism in a commercial project is significantly different than a residential project, where you can't just go run a FICO and get a 15-second response. We're a full underwriter on that side as well. And so, with 21 different underwriting types, that doesn't mean all of them fit inside that bucket. All that being said, you kind of have to understand the full ecosystem all the way through. And then when you're actually ready to go out there and turn wrenches, and a partner, we're actually seeing a lot of subs that are being assigned to these projects saying we can do it. And then they're coming back with change orders. They're changing how the financeability of that project looks. You get a response from utilities for capacity limitations, transformer upgrades, feeder lights upgrades, all the above. And that creates a significant challenge. So those of you that are looking to get into there's a lot of great and intelligent folks right here on this call. Get in touch. Happy to take a call as well. To kind of help you in that transition. But we're also not going to be yes men, and the sake is that we're going to tell you it's all puppies and ponies over here. There's very, very few of us that are actually true developers that allow for that end result to be executable as the end of it. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on that and the full ecosystem.
No, that's great. That is super important for everybody to realize as well too. And frankly, if you make a mistake or when you're looking at a residential project, there's costs associated with it. But if you make a mistake from a commercial perspective, you're talking could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, even speccing the wrong conduit size could cost you an extra $10,000. I mean, it's very important that you have the right people in the right places. And you're right. I mean, it's not that people who are working in residential, there's a lot, like you said, everybody's very sophisticated. It's just you got to make sure you know what your limitations are and be able to know who you can reach out to for help, right? That's important. Greg, did you have something?
Just a real quick comment. I never touched on that as far as the money goes. We're not afraid to tell you that it's going to cost some money, because one of the things that I've always held as a tenant for myself is I'm sensitive to spending other people's money. I expect that of other people, and I will do the same thing.
I appreciate that, Greg. I really do.
Because one of the things is, if I can help you save money, and those of us who are in this industry and developers, the same thing. If we can help you save money, we will. But when it comes to spending cubic dollars that you have to spend, we're not going to sugarcoat it. We'll tell you straight.
Yeah. When you get a good team, like an engineering term or a design team, it doesn't have to be us, but I'd like it to be us. They could save you more than the cost of what you're paying them by making sure you have the right products and speccing the right equipment and being cost conscious, value engineering as we go through it. And then even, problems that you may have after the fact. I don't know how many times Greg and Catherine have had to deal with issues that pop up after the fact, of projects that we didn't even design, that we're trying to resolve for customers because they just had someone who just didn't really know what they were doing when they were working on their design. So, and we're not perfect, right? You guys, we've had issues with several customers, but we work through them and able to get those resolved as well too.
Yeah, I'm taking the projects that come to us that are shovel ready. I'm telling you, 8, 9 out of 10, they actually have equipment in there that is not even scalable, has limitations of software for linking in parallel systems on the inverter equipment. We're really familiar with Chint here as well. We've deployed many of those inverters along the way, where we're saying, some resi developer, so they call it to come in and they go, oh, I got Enphase or Solar Edge here. And at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily a limitation of the manufacturer, but it was a limitation of the products they pulled off the shelf to actually account for that overall system configuration. And so that just significantly compounded costs. So, I mean, project even as of 2 weeks ago, I cut $1.75 a watt out of a C&I project, which should have never been there.
Nice.
You should have at least sub $2 at minimum for that overall system size, and they're north of almost $4. So that's just a different mindset. And granted, he was worried about profitability and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm like, well, I just cut $1.75. I have an opportunity now to go close the deal, because now financing mechanisms in that threshold now become enabled. And then the end result ends up being a big referral funnel as the compounding effects of that. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. And you know what? You provided value. Like one of my catchphrases is value added, right? When you provide value, people are going to continue to come to you and utilize your services, customer service and value added. So, all right, well, hey, this is a good segue into the next topic, which I want to talk a little bit about storage, right? And Everett, it's Brewer is your last name, right? Everett Brewer owns Stores Power, and he primarily provides storage systems for large systems. He certainly knows what he's talking about. You could tell from what we've heard him kind of cover at this point, but we've seen a lot on our end of people moving into doing storage more than ever before. And I think it's becoming a lot more popular. I believe you think it's becoming a lot more popular. Otherwise, you wouldn't be capitalizing on a company that provides power storage. So you want to tell us a little bit of your thoughts as it relates to storage and some of the products that you've been able to do over at Stores?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll first start off is what the actual barrier of entries is for energy storage today based off today's policy, right? So first and foremost, you have the PFE and non-PFE rules along with FEOC. And as of right now, there is very, very limited supply that currently isn't already secured, especially in the C&I space. that allows you to actually tap into the federal tax credits. And keeping in mind is if you have any projects that are carrying from 26 to 2027, that if you're not accounting for the beginning of work or the 5% material participation rules for safe harbor, that's going to limit your ability to carry the current structure of 55% of the content, which also follows the FEOC, and the domestic content actually follow the same schedules now, to be able to carry that project forward. So even though you got a runway until 2031 or 2033, you still have to account for the percentages of FEOC / domestic content that follow a similar schedule need to actually carry, and their linear schedule as they actually increase up. So who's your procurement path look like? That's going to change on how you're going to account for constructability and financeability of that project, because whether or not that project is going to qualify for tax credit or not. So if you're doing an investment on the solar side to account for safe harbor or beginning of work structures or material participation structures for this calendar year, that does give the opportunity on a 12-month, 24-month schedule to carry those percentages forward. But you've got to make sure you're really critical on those pieces. Now, when it comes to interconnection methods, there's typically two direct interconnections, unless you're playing from like a Canadian or a South African market on a 600-volt platform, and you have to use transformers. A lot of these are going to be in that, three-phase 208 to, three-phase 480 interconnection methods, but there's also limitations to those as well, especially what's accessible right now. So if you're going to do a hybrid system, which means you're running a hybrid central inverter, a lot of manufacturers have those now, 30, 60, 100K, 125K hybrids now. That allows for PV to tie in along with your battery storage to be selectable. Then you've got to make sure you're accounting for those overall ecosystems and how you're tying those in. Or if you're going straight to an AC coupled battery, where you're typically getting those in an all-in-one finished goods products, it's going to interconnect directly, and then your PV tie is going to be separate. You'll need to make sure you got EMSs that are actually going to tie that solar and battery together. So there's some software considerations that need to be looked at, because not you're going to be chasing where your demand is or where your TOU periods are that you're obviously deploying that energy storage and on behalf of, right? For curtailment or management or any of the other grid services you may be playing on, if you're interconnecting these for VPP and DR and frequency regulation, voltage regulation, all the different auxiliary revenue streams that are now becoming available across the utility market. So these are really, really key across the US is as you go through, you got to really kind of look at it, where I've been blessed where I started as an installation company first and a battery company second. So I understood the application of the product, which allowed us to design those products accordingly, so we could actually see the true application instead of a lot of the Chinese manufacturers saying, I think this is what the US market looks like. Comes in at a great price, but I've got friends that have containers and containers of batteries that are sitting because they made an investment because it was cheap and we can't even install it. So you've got to make sure you're considering all those aspects. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is when you're looking at what can be deployable, the CEC, the California Energy Commission, a lot of the states across the US have actually adopted that as their listing standard. If you're not CEC listed with that product and or combined ESS or DCESS overall solution, you're not going to pass, an inspect, not going to be able to get a permit across the finish line. So always reference CEC. That's going to allow you to select the proper suppliers that meet those conditions. And then that way you in turn are not going to run into another roadblock, because that's something that's really, really key. And those manufacturers that are telling you they're meeting FEOC conditions, make sure they're not self-certifying this whole legal aspect of it all. We're seeing a lot of, I got a legal opinion and we meet the FEOC rules, you can go get a tax credit. Many a times we're finding that is actually false. Those legal opinions are off context that are not accurate per the latest policies. So getting the proper white papers, verifying some of the top legal firms. If you want those extra little parts and pieces, there's folks here on this call, including me, that can help cut the fat, let you know what's true or not. But just make sure you're accounting for equipment that truly is ITC eligible if you're telling you so.
Great. Well, thank you, Everett, for that insight. I appreciate it. And we have worked with Everett on some of the projects that we're working on, and with some of our customers looking at alternative, power supplies, specifically with EV chargers. And he's been great to work with, very knowledgeable in his field. And by all means, Everett, if you haven't, drop your contact information into the chat, and if anybody needs some help from Everett, I'm sure he'd be willing to help you for sure. Let's see, the other topic that I have would be, we talk a little bit about connections on roofs, and we have Casey Smith on the line, who is from Solar Strap. One of the things that I've been very firm on in my career is there are some companies that do non-penetrating roof connections that are adhesive, which in my mind are things that can change over time, and I'm not a big proponent of those. Casey has done a lot of his product is actually chemically adhered to the roof system, so it's not an adhesive. It actually chemically bonds with the roof surface, and which is something that will stay intact for a very long time. And so I'd like to see if Casey has a minute or two. He wants to tell us a little bit about his product and how that works and what that chemical bond is, so that we are aware of it. I think that would be important for those of you who are working on, this is more on flat roofs, I think, where you're trying to do larger roof systems. Could even be they have their own process and their own baskets, which are similar to a ballast system, but obviously they're connecting to the roof with their chemical adhesion process, the Solar Strap, and so you don't have ballast on it as well. So Casey, you want to give us a little bit of background on your company?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that intro there. So yeah, as you're mentioning, we use kind of a unique process where it's actually heat welding, which then when you melt the two pieces of membrane together, it chemically bonds, like he was saying. It creates a single piece chemically. We have been doing this now for almost 20 years, but we just finally finished up our ICC number about 5 years ago. So it took us about 7 years to go through the International Code Council to kind of get that number issued to us on that chemically bonding adhesion process. But it allows us to work on all membrane roofs, TPO, PVCs, your KEEs, basically any of those like plastic looking roofs that you see out there. It allows us to install with those, and it's technically non-penetrating regardless of how that roof is affixed to the building, right? And by doing that, we can install on a lot of roofs that most ballasted systems can't go on. So kind of, for instance, our bread and butter is cold storage right now, where roofs are typically 70, 80 foot off the ground, high wind zones. And we could still put this adhesion up there in our attachment and go without ballast. So our typical system comes in at about 2 to 2.5 pounds per square foot, even on a 70 or 80 foot roof. So it allows us to get in there in a lot of older buildings with updating in codes. So when we're switching from 716 to 722, snow loads are going crazy with that. So even here in Southern California, Los Angeles, we're seeing snow loads added into the code. I just did a project in Los Angeles, and it was 10 PSF snow load in like downtown Los Angeles. Like, where's this coming from? It's always 70 here, but that is disqualifying a lot of buildings for ballast now. And that's kind of where we could go in and install without that ballast and using our proprietary attachment, and still be within our ICC number and actually FM Global compliant as well.
FM Global is a hard process to get through, for sure. For those of you who aren't aware of that, you don't need to be aware of it if you aren't aware of it now.
It's not fun at all, not fun. But yeah, we have not been denied FM Global acceptance on any of our projects that we went for yet. So
that's great. That's great. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Casey, feel free to drop your contact information in the chat if any of you are looking for alternatives to ballast or alternatives to an adhesive type of a roof system. Reach out to Casey. We wholeheartedly support his program and his product as well. So I appreciate that, Casey. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Scott.
I don't have anything else. We were going to go over a little bit on we did have a funding company on, Solrite, but I think Tavita had to drop off, so we weren't able to get her to chat a little bit. But that's always a lively discussion when we talk about that. But I guess what I'd like to do we probably can end right now. I think we've had some great conversations, but is there anybody on the call who has any questions for anyone on the call as well? Some of our people who spoke. What's that?
Blake does.
Blake. Okay, Blake Randolph.
And I'm happy to touch on any kind of financing as well if anybody has any financing questions. So we've been doing that our entire career, and I actually own a couple funds myself. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great, Everett. Well, let's see what Blake's question is first, and then maybe we'll double back and have you go over a little bit of the woes related to finance. And we've seen some pretty big players fold up over the past 6 or 8 months, and it's interesting to see. And I think a lot of it has to stem to how different the market is as it relates to financing and those requirements on the finance companies. But anyway, Blake, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Sorry, actually, no, I didn't. I had to jump out and jump back in. So I don't know, maybe I got.
Greg was putting him on the spot.
That's it. I saw the hand up and then he went away.
Right, you're BayWa with distribution, right, Blake?
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do? BayWa Distribution is a supplier of products in the industry. You do mainly commercial, residential, or all of the above?
We do it all, and we really are. We strive to be kind of a partner with our customers, really working down in the weeds with them. Part of what I'm doing with BayWa is bringing services in-house, working with qualified vendors like the one call we're on here, and then trying to find what other services might be beneficial for our customers. So that's part of what I'm doing, bringing that, working with vendors to have kind of a end-to-end solution through also providing distribution at BayWa. But yeah, we're a nationally understood distributor of solar materials and continue to grow. So always looking to meet with new customers.
Great, we appreciate it, Blake. Thanks for participating. Let's double back, Everett. If you want to tell us a little bit about what you've seen from the finance perspective. I'm not sure if I'm suspecting you may finance some commercial projects, but there's a lot of finance companies that only do residential. So tell us what your thoughts are and how the market has really changed and how it's affected a lot of these larger companies that we're seeing get impacted by these financing and being able to get money for their projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Home Analytics report just came out yesterday. I don't know if you guys are on that thread to take a look at it, but, Q1's down 34% in the residential market. There's kind of two big thresholds that we're finding in the resi side. You've got the TPO side of the equation, which is really staying healthy in the regards on how well they prepared from a FIAC and PFE standpoint on forecasting for their safe harbor rules, and then how they're going to continually approach that. So typically right now on the TPO side, you're going to be traditionally assigned to your Tesla, Enphase, SolarEdge type of overall ecosystems. And there's a few that are under review right now in addition to that, but there's still some scrutiny there on who's self-certifying or not. The other thing too is we're starting to see some of the smaller guys that are getting a little alienated because they're getting towards the end of their safe harbor overall capacity in this case. And so the smaller EPCs that are not able to secure much volume, we're starting to see those guys looking for new homes. That's where they're kind of looking at the HDMs, the Thrives, the SolRights, etc. And even some of those challenges that are going on with that because the financial market on who's buying their credits for those prepaids and leases and so on and so forth are getting tighter and tighter, and buying those credits at a lower dollar amount. I've seen where credits were purchased originally at 88 to 92 cents on the dollar, and now I'm seeing transactions in the low 70s. And so from a tax equity buyer standpoint, so it's kind of starting to change those economics. So the free battery model in Texas is starting to kind of get challenged. If those of you, Blake's smiling at me, knows what that means. But ultimately, we just got to be really critical on how that works and making sure we're certifying funds. Usually it was the lender reviewing the EPC, and I think it needs to be reversed. where the tail's not wagging the dog. We need to actually understand where our funding sources are at, because it's changing how our credit lines are looking at the BayWas of the world. It's changing how that liability is looked at. We're starting to see job accounts over just traditional, 30, net 60-day terms in those cases. But that's how that's functioning. But I will tell you, the lender side, which is the other side of the equation, is stepping in pretty heavy right now. They're realizing the TPOs are fairly crippled. That market is still uncertain in that case. And there actually still is tier 1 manufactured equipment that's still from the original origin that we've all been deploying for our entire careers now, from China and some of those areas. They're not playing any of the funny games on routing through Malaysia and some of that, some of those tactics that are obviously catching up on a federal basis. But with that being said, the lenders are coming back in and calling it a home improvement loan, where I've actually done side-by-side comparisons with a TPO bond of materials, which meets all the FEOC and energy community and all of the domestic content requirement. And one of the models I ran just about a month ago now, that BOM for that 12 kilowatt solar installation with 20 kilowatt hours whole home battery backup, the BOM alone was $42,000 to meet that criteria for that TPO lender. We took that same installation type and used the tier 1 manufactured goods that are out there that are non-ITC qualified, and that BOM was $30,500. I took those two models and then did a payment calculation side by side of each other, looking at a 20-year traditional loan project, no ITC, comparison to that TPO payment. I was within $6. Now, when I go sit down with BayWa, my $500,000 credit line, instead of it covering 12 jobs, I now have that credit line that actually covers 18 jobs. That changes the exposure, it changes the payment terms, and also all the STIPs change too. So look at your administrative dollars you have to go through and submit all the STIPs for the TPOs as well. It's averaging between $275 and $321 administrative dollars reduction, plus the timeline of getting paid. Remember, the lenders that really kicked us off in this space before Sunrun started picking up the TPO model and it started to see that transition through the rate increases in 2023, that transition has actually been really demise of a lot of these industry guys. And so where we had the easy button back in the day, you submit the requirements for there, and sometimes you're even funded same day or even next day. So in this case, sometimes we just got to go back to the good old days. Yes, there's some things that need to be improved. We've all been learning. And I think then at this point, we've seen that come and go, and where we've seen companies actually survive through some of these challenges. But some of this is self-inflicted. Sometimes it's actually just going through and being blinded in the fact that TPOs are the only model. I'm not saying it's a bad model, but you have to make sure you're verifying that those channels are safe and correct. So those are the two channels that are in place right now. We're starting to see a lot of concentration risks considerations now with the lenders, especially on the TPOs. Getting a lot of concentration in California, a lot in Texas, a lot in Florida, a lot in Illinois. But one storm comes through, it actually changes the liability point. That's why a lot of folks have settled down in Puerto Rico and some of those other markets like that. So with all that being said, the lender market doesn't care because it's secured on that credit side and a little bit less of the liability point. So we're now in the home improvement market, construction market, traditional infrastructure plays, where we actually have a lot more longevity. So something I just wanted to touch base on those points. So commercially, we'll never set a rules, but happy to touch on the commercial side if you want.
I think we would love that, but I think we probably need to wrap this up, kind of keep this to an hour. Everybody's schedules are tight. We don't want to go over, but we'd love to have you back on another call. And your insights are super valuable, and maybe it'd be a good idea. Maybe the next call we can get So Right to be on the call as well, and that might be a good discussion. But I think Emmett, did you have one final question? If
Actually,
you take a minute.
I had a question for Everett. Looking at the VPP model in Texas, is that wrapping up, or are they having problems? Because it seems like it would be sustainable. It would be more cost effective in the long run for them to continue that program and expand it across states versus putting in all this infrastructure for all these demands, because Texas is on its own grid. But there are other states that are having inclement weather issues, the communities are growing because people are moving from cities. And you would think would be a good thing for the infrastructure, or I'm just looking for some clarity on, is the model sustainable?
Super familiar with the BPP market across the US, heavily involved in Texas. We've got 10,000 batteries installing right now in Texas as we speak, all behind the meter, all BPP managed and controlled. But however, they're highly sensitive to the economics of the CapEx to get those jobs installed. And so a lot of the major players like your GoodLeap TPOs, they've really retracted back out of there. Your light reaches have really changed the concentration risk. So your traditional TPO deployments, for even though that BPP revenue is there, which has changed a little bit, there has been some adjustments. The free night stuff is starting to hedge a little bit differently now, as of even yesterday, looking at the data. And so with that being said, it really comes down to how you're aligning with your TPO, which are traditionally private funds. They're not going to be your traditional TPO scenario. So that's where you have to be ultra careful on who you're going to align that with, because there has been some volatility of the couple that I referenced earlier, where you're seeing delayed payments, you're seeing how they're not as cash flush as they used to. I know too much to say too many details at this moment, but at this exact stage, you've got to be ultra conservative. So me coming from the tax equity side, we actually set up our own fund, just for the sake is that we didn't want to have any volatility and be relying on a third party for those executables. But the BPP market is strong, but the CapEx requirements for that equipment is higher, and it's really splitting the hairs right now on getting that to work. A non-TPO, a non-ITC qualified product in Texas does not pencil. I know, because I freaking broke it down to the penny as an underwriter and trying to figure out how to make that work, and it didn't. We still need that tax credit for Texas to be viable and see the IRRs and the consumer adoption that's needed, especially on a 10,000 system deployment. So you have to be really critical on that, making sure that money's really there to pay you out as an EPC or developer or sales org, whatever channel you're actually participating in.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you for that insight, Everett. Appreciate it. We are out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us on our webinar today, and we're super grateful for you guys, the professionals you are in the industry, and the value you guys provide. We love working with you guys, and hopefully if there's anybody who's on this call that needs some engineering or design assistance, you can reach out to us. And then we have some other professionals on here that drop their information in the chat. Feel free to contact them if they can help. The whole idea is to have an open forum where we help each other be better in the industry. So I do appreciate everybody's time, and have a great day. And we'll see you on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it,
everyone. Bye.
I think that